Welcome, everybody. We're working on the Unit 10 exercises here in this video. Um, if you recall, the topic for this unit is creating databases, creating tables, and indexes, and working with all of those commands. I have opened up the attached um, document in the background. I do want to make a special note here before I dig in, because we are going to play a little bit with destructive commands here, not just creative ones, where we're going to drop some stuff. And sometimes the database with intent blocks people from doing certain tasks. So I'm just going to highlight this fact here that um, it says you may want to create the database by either using the command line or MySQL Workbench, but you must provide documentation showing they were created with the required columns and not null restrictions. So in other words, the settings inside of your program need to be correct to make sure that this works correctly. We've talked about this feature earlier. I think all of you should be fine. And if we do run into an issue as we're working, we'll correct it, right? And just speak up and we'll share screens and take a look at it. Let's just go to the document and start doing some of the commands. And some of them are pretty darn easy. So we're going to create a brand new database. This is I think this was developed by Christopher, obviously, because he always does. He does White Beak Dog Rescue, so I'm just following along with his example. So we're going to build a database for rescuing dogs. All right. So first task is we're going to go into MySQL Workbench. I'm going to close all my open query windows here, and no, I'm not saving any of it. I'm going to collapse down all my tables, and you guys notice that I do have a rescue database that I built last year, or it wasn't last year, it was, 9 months ago, something like that. So I'm actually going to begin by dropping the database on purpose, so that I can rebuild it. So I'm just going to drop database rescue DB. The autocomplete actually worked there. And then I'm going to execute that query and it is gone. I'm going to get rid of that command. We'll just pretend like it never happened. Right. All right. And now let's start doing the build here. So the create is pretty simple, but hey, we got practice also, or at least a view of somebody destroying a database. And yes, it ruined all the data, by the way. Now, when I look at the instructions, I think it's named like this, right? Capital R, capital DB. We've already talked about this earlier. It's really pretty irrelevant. And you'll see in the schema table, it'll come up without those. But let's run that query and make sure that it works. All right. It created it. I don't see it listed yet. So I'm going to hit the refresh, right? And right now, classic models expanded, which tells me what? Then I'm still using that database and I'm not using the rescue database. And since the assumption is I do want to use this one, right? And you notice how that one's highlighted and this one's not. I'm going to go ahead and issue a use command. So I'm just going to say use rescue DB, right? And we'll execute that one as well, right? And now you see the highlight is moved. We have no tables yet, but we perform those commands. So first we created it, and now we want to create a table named dog. And all we have as a reference here is this table telling us how to build our table. Okay. And so what's good here is that it's giving us all the column names, right? So we have dog ID, name, gender, weight, date rescued, and breed. Whether or not we're going to make it a key or a primary key or not, right? And we'll have to talk about some of this because I think some of this might not be correct, and I'll show you what I mean as we kind of do it. What's going to be not null, the data type that's suggested, and the size if appropriate. Now, there's a couple little things here, and this is on me for not updating this document, but you notice that for the name column, we have an N varchar It's not a typo, but when we were teaching this on SQL Server, that was a different data type that we could use on that system. We're just going to use varchar there, by the way. I'm just telling you this up front. All right, so we need to use this chart basically to help guide us. But the one thing that's kind of missing, right, and this is not provided, is it not a good idea to have an ID number for the ID, or the ID being the primary key is what I'm trying to say. Yes, and not only that, but I think it might not be a bad idea to also have it auto increment. Let's try that feature, right? But we do need to build the table. So let's start there. Right, so I'm going to come down a couple of lines here, and I'm just going to say create table. Did they give us a name for it? Yeah, the name is dog. Now, when I do this, open and close parens and a semicolon, and then all my column names are going to go in between here. And I like to do this in advance. I just spread them out and then tab in and start typing my stuff. The first column we're going to build is dog ID. For the reasons we talked about during the lecture, we're going to make that of a data type of integer, a counting number. We're going to declare it as the primary key right here. I could do it down below as well. And I'm also going to set it to auto increment. And thank you for the auto complete there, MySQL Workbench. And so that's going to be our primary key field. All right. The next field that or column that we need to build is, let's see, the dog name. I'm just looking at the document here on the other screen. Right. And we're going to use a varchar for that. And we'll use capacity of 50. And the dog needs to have a name. So we're going to make sure this one is not. No. So that one can't be empty. And, you know, sometimes people have very creative names for their pets, and we might need all 50 characters. You know, or you might just call them Duke or something like that. All right. Next column, tabbing in again, is going to be the gender. And okay, so now we can talk about like how much data we're going to store here. But if you look at the document, right, they're suggesting a 1-character thing. So we're going to designate it male or female with an F or an M. I don't think pets worry too much about you know, other gender issues, frankly, but maybe they do. We just don't know about it. Right. So we're just going to declare it as a character field of size 1. All right. You notice I'm not making that not null because, you know, maybe pet comes in, you know, you just don't know. Or somebody, you know, that calls you and they don't know. Something like that. We'll also do weight. That will come in as an integer. I could argue floating point there as well, but I think within a pound is usually pretty accurate. Maybe for small pets, you do pounds and ounces, but whatever, let's just do an integer. I think that's just easier. This is a rescue database after all, so we're going to have a date rescued column, and that's going to be of type date, right? So we know when the pet came in. And then we're also going to indicate the breed. That's also going to be a varchar of size 50. And I'm not going to make that not now. Sometimes people don't know the breeds, real frankly. And they just guess. And that was the case for my dog, for example. It's kind of interesting when you start to study dog breeds and their personalities and stuff, how much of it is really embedded into their DNA. Let's go ahead and execute this command. Let's make sure that we're getting all the columns we're supposed to. Okay, all that stuff looks fine to me. Name's not null, and the ID's not null. Okay, well, when it's a primary key, that's implied anyhow. So, all right. I think we're ready to execute. So cursor's anywhere inside that code. We're hitting the selective execute. Looks like it worked. Let's refresh and then make sure the table is there. And I'm going to click on it and I can see all the columns. And it is currently empty. All right, let's move on to the next task. The next task was to insert these records into the database. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but you could, in principle, you could grab this data, and I'm just, not that you should do it this way, but I'm just showing you that you potentially could, right? You paste it in there. There it is. And then all you have to do is put all your insert statements around it, right? So I'm going to kind of do that. I'm just going to build it up manually like this. And so I'm going to start with, how do we put information into a table? We use our insert into. What table? Well, we only have one table, so it's going to be the dog table. And then we would, in the order that we want to enter the information, and it would be, and I want you to catch this here, that the order is excluding an ID number, right? Because remember, the ID number is going to auto increment. So I'm going to start with the dog name, not the ID, right? Because that's going to automatically happen with the auto increment. And then we'll do gender, and say I can see it below, right? So like the weight, the date rescued, and the breed. Those are the fields we're going to insert. And then we want to declare the values, and those are going to be inside parentheses. So each set of data here is going to be inside parentheses. And I don't know if you guys just caught what I just did. This is a silly little coding trick, but I want all this text to be indented. So I just highlight a portion of each line and hit the tab key, and it brings it all in. I don't know if you guys knew that trick. One thing I don't want to forget is way at the end here, I want a semicolon somewhere so that the statement actually ends. And then I'm going to kind of work in a weird sort of way. I'm going to type in the opening parens for each line, and I just screwed up a line. Oops, I can fix it. Right. And I like to do kind of repetitive actions over and over again, similar actions. If you guys are like, why is he doing it like that? And then this is going to be repetitive too, at least for these lines. And then this one just needs a closer. And then for each one of the things, if it's text, I'm going to put quotes around it and then a comma. That's a character, so that's got to have quotes as well. Right, and then a comma, and then this is a number, and that obviously has a tab stop in it, and I'm just getting rid of it. Doesn't really matter because that's just a number. And then a date needs quotes around it too, and then a comma, and this is text also, so quotes like that. And then you want to do that to each line, right? We get it into that format. The only data that doesn't need quotes is the weight, because that's an integer, right? Weight is an integer. All right, because I'm lazy, and also because I already have the code typed up, so why retype it? I'm just going to paste in the rest of this, but you guys should go through the mechanical process of doing that. Now, if you want, you could add additional information. You have to like just use that. Like, so for example, I'll get my dog in here. Her name is Abby. She's female. Gosh, she's a little bit chunky, so she's about 65 pounds. Oh gosh, the date rescued is about 10 years ago when the Houston hurricanes happened. She was rescued from a flood down there, and ironically, they're flooding again. So let's just subtract 10 years and say 2015. I don't know if that's the correct year or not, but it's about close, right? And we'll say, this date 10 years ago. And then a comma, and then she is an Australian Shepherd, as best as we can tell. And that frankly, that's a guess. She's probably mixed with something else. All right, but you could add more, right? So if you want to, more robust database, and I just throw this out there, you could ask an AI engine to generate a list of 100, right? If you really want to have a database to work with. And real frankly, when we do indexing, indexing makes more sense when you have more entries, so um, for example, I could just take this code, right, and say, Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot or any one of those AI engines and say, please generate an additional 100 entries for this insert statement, give it the insert statement and then let it do it, and then it saves you the typing, by the way, right? And that's what I feel like when you're learning how to code, that's an acceptable use of AI to generate data to put into a database, and yeah, that would, in the AI world, we call that synthetic data. It's not real, but hey, it gives us something to put in there and see how it works. Right. So this is my insert statement, and if you wish and you want to expand on it, please do. Add your own dogs or whatever. But let's go ahead and run this one. Here's the execute. And it gave me an error. So let's see what the error is. It says insert into incorrect date value at row 1. It says 12/15/22 for column date rescued at row 1. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this seems to be a little problematic. So where did that come from? Okay. And this is one of the things, like if you're copying pasting from the table, you guys notice that how the date came in with slashes. Well, that doesn't work here. That's the wrong date format. So I'm going to go 2022-12-15, year, month, day. So no panic necessary, right? You just read the error message and it showed me which one was wrong, right down here. So now I'm going to try it again. And this time it worked. And if we wish, we can go to the dog table here and run the select all here and take a look and just make sure the data got there, and it did. Okay. And you guys should validate that too. You can close that if you wish. Sometimes it's handy just to have it there. All right. Everybody okay with that command? No issues or anything, anybody? All right, let's move on to the next instruction here. And it says, run the following query. Oh, they're giving it to us. All right, so I don't have to type this. So I'm just going to copy it. I do have it on my other screen here, so I'm just copying it from there. And I'm just going to paste it in. And then what's the other instruction? Oh, what were the results? How many rows did the query have to search, etc. So why don't we just go ahead and run it. So let's see. It says select dog name, gender, weight, date rescued, breed from dog. Okay. Do you guys notice that we're not even thinking about the ID field? Oh, wow. When we looked at the table before and saw the data, did we look at that? No, we didn't. Let's go back to the table. I do want you to notice how the ID field auto incremented. Now, do I need to display the ID field here? Well, we can do it with or without, right? One reason why maybe doing it with is handy. Well, this will tell us how many rows we have when we run it anyhow, right? And it says 5 rows returned. But the ID field also does that, doesn't it? Right. So I would say that maybe an alteration you could do here, and this is not required, right? But let's just do it anyhow. We can add dog ID to the output. And then we're only looking for the female dogs, right? So how many results should it bring back? Well, that's pretty easy, right? It's going to bring back 2 results because previously there was only 1 female in there, and now there's 2 female canines in there. So what were the results? We returned the number of female dogs that we had from the table. That's a very basic query, and we were just told to run it and look at the results. And and how many rows did the query have to search? So this is what I'm trying to jog out of your brain here. Well, to find those female dogs, it had to search all 5 rows, right? Um, Now let's actually have a little fun with AI, and I'm gonna do this. And I don't know how many of you have ever played with coding engines, um, generative AI to help you write code. And I experiment with a whole bunch of them by virtue of teaching all the AI classes here at Gateway. And usually my go-to if I'm writing code is usually Chat GPT, or I go to Claude. I was using Chat GPT earlier today, and I don't know if I'm going to exhaust my free credits because I do not pay for it. And I'm going to say, given this, my SQL query, please generate 100, or please, how about revise the query to generate, let's say, 150 dogs to insert. And I'm going to paste in my query and let it do its thing. I want you to notice I use the word please. And this is kind of a, all right. And there you go. Now, it didn't quite exactly do it. And I'm not really sure why it cut it off. All right, so they're using like random code generation. All right, so I'm just gonna borrow this code as is, and this is kind of interesting. And I don't know if you guys have uh, played with stuff like this. And let's just bring it over to MySQL Workbench and see what the heck happens. And this should be interesting from the standpoint of what happens here. So let me just take a look at this before I execute it. All right, so it has the originals. I'm going to get rid of those. It doesn't make sense to use those. And then we'll get rid of that. And then, even what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of all this like nonsense stuff that they put in here. And basically, I'm just truncating it to just be data. And then I'm going to end it with a semicolon and then run this command. So I'm going to add these additional blocks. It's not quite 150, but all right, let's execute this command now. All right, it worked. I'm going to run the select all from the dog table again. And I just want to show you now I have a whole bunch of data in there. Right. And notice the auto increment. So we only have 25, but whatever. It's still more than what we had before. And there's a mix of weights, breeds, names, and all that, right? And I didn't have to type it. I love it, right? And so this is the kind of like goofy thing that I think AI is really helpful for doing, is just generating mundane data. All right, so now that I have that, let's take that same query we have up here and run it again, right? So let's run it again and then take a look at the output, and it found how many females? Well, it found 12 of them if you count this, right? I can also tell by the query result 12 rows returned, and my dog is still in there. So it was the original Brook dog that was there, but then all the other names and other cute little names, and a whole mix of different breeds, which is a little more random than the original every other one's a German short-haired pointer, right? Because that's the breed that Christopher likes a lot. Anyhow, all right, so that's something that you can do, and I would encourage you, like, if you want to like build a database to tinker with, that you can build synthetic data like that pretty easily and utilize it. All right, let's move on to the next prompt here. Now it says create the following index on the ID column of the table dog. So they give us the syntax. So let's just do that. And I want you to notice here that the prefix that Christopher used, right, when he built this document, or maybe it was Christian, I'm not really sure, one of our other instructors in the web program, their prefix, let's call it not standard, but convention, is to just say IX for index. And when we were looking at the W3 schools approach, they were doing this, IDX, right? And then what I used to do in the old days is I would just say index, because that made sense to me, and you do whatever you wish for yourself. Let's follow the example from W3 schools. Doesn't really matter exactly what the command is, but also we're doing it on the gender column. Gender here, I have lowercase g. Here it's an uppercase G. So I'm just going to make them match. That's just me kind of being a little persnickety. So we're creating the index on the dog table gender column. And I'll have you notice that when you're looking at W3 examples, they'd put a space here. And here they're just kind of combining it. But it doesn't matter. Either way will work. Okay, so now we're going to run that command. You'll notice that it worked. It went really fast. And 0 records affected, 0 duplicates, 0 warning. Now, why would we worry about this one? Because if we're creating an index, right, in principle, you might think, oh, that's got to be unique. No, not necessarily. Because I could have several dogs that are the same gender. Well, yeah, obviously, right? But then if I want to find the females, it'll be faster now. The result, because it's already indexed, it's already like, hey, all the females are here. They're already grouped, that type of thing. Now, another really kind of interesting command, and I think this is in the document as well, is we can take a look at the indexes that were created by running this command, which is show indexes from dog. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to just drop that command in, and I'm just going to execute this one. So we'll selective run. And then I want you to look at the output. And this is interesting. It shows me that there is a index on gender, and you can tell because I named it that, right? So there it is, right? Which column is it non-unique? So that's set to 1, which means true. So obviously with gender, you're gonna have lots of females and lots of males, so it can't be unique, right? They have the cardinality is set to 2. Null is allowed here, right? Because that's how the thing is set up. The index is built on a data type called a binary tree. That's a whole separate discussion, but it's a way data is organized. And is the index visible? Yes. Remember, we talked about how it can be invisible. So you can not let people see it, basically. I do want you to notice, though, that the primary key on dog ID is also an index that happens automatically. So a primary key is automatically indexed. And it says non-unique, that's set to false. So these must be unique. And that's also visible. But you can, if you're not sure what indexes exist on a table, you can run this command and it'll tell you what the indexes are on the table. If I expand the table in the schema, I also want you to notice that not only can we look at the columns, we've done that before, but we can look at the indexes. And then I'm going to refresh this because it didn't update here after we created that, but the index of each is shown here. And then I want you to look down here as the info changes as I click on them. So I can also see what indexes exist on a table by doing that, right? All right, so I think that's really helpful to know. All right, let's move on here. And then of course, you would put your output here. All right. So they want us to run the female thing again, but notice this time we're going to add the explain command to it, which is going to tell us what it's going to do prior to it actually executing the query. It's not going to run the query. It's going to tell us how the query is going to operate. And so let's drop that command in. This is kind of an interesting one. All right, so we're going to explain running this query. Now, I do want you to notice I'm not including the ID number on this one because that's the way it was given. So I'm just going to roll with that. We're running it on females here. So let's execute this command and let's look at the output. All right. So this is the output. It says, okay, well, it gives us an ID. It says select type is simple. The table is dogs. The table is not partitioned. It's a reference type. The possible keys, right? In other words, is gender, but the actual key is this. The key length is 5. Why is the key length 5? That's kind of weird, right? Well, it has to do with how it's recorded in memory. But it gives us an explanation of how it's going to run. Now, if I look at certain pieces of information here, what I think is kind of interesting is you would think with an index for a character field where there's only one character in it, that the index would be really small. But apparently it needs index the length of 5 numeric characters in order to index this properly, right? To make it work. Now, it probably has some assumptions that go with it, but that's part of the engineering of it. And it is this type of stuff that database admins look at when they're building stuff, because it'll give you some clues as to how it operate efficiently or inefficiently. Now, with this one in the homework, it says, what were the results now with the index? All right, well, this is explain. So we're looking at different things. It says, how many rows did the query have to search? Well, however many rows you put in, but it searched 12 rows. So interestingly, how many entries do we have in the dog table now? Well, we have more than that. We have 25, but it only searched 12, which is about half, right? So because the point of this is, because it's indexed, it didn't search through the whole table, because we already have something indexed for female. So when I do a selective search like this, it's like, I already got that. Here's the results. We're only searching 12 rows, the ones that are female, right? Where if it was not indexed, it would search all 25 rows to pull back the same information. This is the difference, right? So something that we might normally search for, we index, and then the results come up much faster, right? Okay, not a big deal for 12 rows, 25 rows, but what if it was 12,000 or 25,000 or 12 million or 25 million? Yeah, it makes a huge difference. All right, let's move on to the next command and see if we can get this done before we leave here today. Next command is drop the index gender you created. All right, and let's do that. So here's my command for doing that. Execute that. Oh, but you have to remember I named it differently, so I got to copy the name from here. All right. Let's execute this command. It worked. All right, let's come over here. Let's refresh the schema table. You notice the index went away. And then let's run this command again. And, you know, I'm thinking here that that command, there should be follow-up questions here that I may have omitted. But what I would like you to do is what I'm doing right now. So please follow what I'm doing. So we dropped it. Now we're going to run the explain command again. And then notice how many rows it had to search this time. It had to search all 25. So this is kind of the point, right? If I happen to insert, and folks, I think this document is missing some work, some pieces here. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep going because it's missing a couple of questions. I don't know how they got deleted from the document. I'm really kind of perplexed by that. But we're going to add, all right, so I'm going to like fix this document and re-upload it again, but I want you guys to follow what I'm doing. The next step was to add more dogs. All right, now I'm going to be super kind to you guys because I know the time is short and we got another class that follows. Here's the query I'm just about to type in. So if you guys want to copy it, go for it. So we're going to add a few more dogs here. I'm going to run that query. All right, that worked. Then I'm going to create another table called adopter. So I don't know how this stuff got deleted from the document, but I'm you know, in the interest of time, I'm just going to share the code with you. So we're going to create a table now for people that might adopt a dog, right? Notice the similarities. We have a auto increment on this once again, first, last name, and an email address. Let's execute that query. Then we're also going to have another table in the chat once again. This is kind of like somebody doing your homework for you almost instantaneously, but it's my fault because that document is broken and I really apologize for that. So I have to fix that instruction set. So we'll also create a table for a dog adopter where we're going to combine, and this is kind of interesting. We're basically linking together which dog is getting adopted by which person. So this table just holds that information. None of the information has to be unique here. Let's run that query. So now we have updated adopter, dog, and dog adopter tables. Then finally, we're going to add some people that want to adopt some dogs. Code's in the chat. And there's the code for that. And I can tell Christopher typed this up because he always does the Three Stooges when he teaches. And he's trying to be funny about it. So we have Larry, Moe, and Curly of the Three Stooges here as people who are adopting dogs. And let's run that command. All right, and let's refresh our schema once again. And then let's look at the adopter table, make sure their names made it there. They sure did. And then in order to get some dogs adopted, and this is where I'll kind of leave the last step to you, is we need to insert into this table which dog each one of these people are adopted. And of course, this is going to be a different answer for everybody. So what we have to do is we have to look at the dog table to see what dogs we have, get their ID number, and then the adopters are easy because it's just 3 people, right? So pick 3 dogs from that table, their ID numbers, and you can kind of choose them randomly, I suppose, and then do that as well. If you want to think about how that might look, we would do an insert into which table, dog adopter, right? What are we inserting? Well, dog ID, comma, adopter ID. These values, and this isn't going to be a lot, so I guess we'll just go ahead and do it. So let's just say we take dog ID 12 and match it up with adopter ID 1, comma, dog ID, I don't know, 3, and match that up with dog adopter 2. And then let's pick dog 25 with dog adopter 3. Put in a semicolon, and let's run that. And then you can take a look at the dog adopter table here to see that that's in. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, I could then run a query that would pull back and match, a join basically, who adopted what dog with their names and all of that stuff. So that would be the last part of the assignment. And I'll let you do that on your own. I'm going to add all those instructions to that document, but I expect you to do at least what I did on the screen here. I didn't give you this code in the chat, but you can, screen grab it really quick, hint, 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 so you don't have to retype it, but it's pretty simple, right? All right, folks, this video will end here. I will update that document, and maybe I'll do it right before the next class starts here, but this video is done and the class is done too.